Hello and welcome to the Overwhelm is Optional podcast. I'm Heidi, Marke, coach and biggest cheerleader for successful but secretly overwhelmed women. As well as weekly episodes here on the podcast, you can find out more about what I offer by going to heidimarke.co.uk. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Overwhelm is Optional podcast, where we gently rebel, gently but firmly, against the idea that overwhelm is just the way things are, that pushing yourself to think and not to procrastinate, the push to get things done in order to feel okay, in order to hold your life together, is just a nonsense. It's just not okay with you. It's not what you do. It's not how we do things around here. We don't do things perfectly, but we are against pushing yourself through overwhelm, forcing your mind to focus through overwhelm, overloading the mind, because overwhelm is a symptom to show that you're overloading your mind. It's just not designed to do all of those things and keep all of that information in it and make all those decisions on its own, which naturally leads us to, okay, so how do we do things differently? And that's where we use these three things. One, we listen to the body, like the old friend it indeed is, with love, with kindness, and with curiosity and playfulness. We listen deeply to our hearts, and we control our attention. So the attention is so valuable, and everybody wants your attention. So instead of trying to control the mind or quieten the mind, if we focus on controlling the attention instead, we can allow the mind to do its thing. We can notice the busyness, the fear, the anxiety, the overwhelm in the mind, and then we can bring the attention to where we choose to place it, valuing that. So these are great skills to have, well worth learning. So if you like the sound of this, if you're done with pushing yourself through overwhelm and exhaustion in order to hold together all of the carefully crafted pieces of your life which were supposed to work really well, what were we promised? If you get your head down and work hard, you can have more choice, more freedom. Well, that didn't work out very well, did it? Because there's a whole lot more to choice and freedom than just working hard. So much more. You know this. If this resonates with you, then I'm really glad you're here. And if you're usually here, then I really, really appreciate you being here every week. It means more than I can explain. So I really want to thank all those people who are just showing up every week to listen. I hugely appreciate your support in being here. I trust that you find this helpful. Otherwise, why would you be here? You wouldn't. So thank you. Thank you for showing up and being here. And if you're not here every week, or if you're new, welcome. And if you can hear snoring in the background, that's one of my dogs, Rosie. And if you hear this kind of like other noise, it's probably Nutmeg, who's younger and having a bit of a fidget at the moment. I used to edit it out. What's the point? It's life, and I love them, so they're very much part of the podcast. But if you hear funny noises, it's Nutmeg and Rosie behind me. Anyway, have you registered for my upcoming workshop? So if you're catching this is going out 6 days before. So if you catch it in time, please do come along to this workshop. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I've been delving deeply into the idea that we get easily overwhelmed by the need to up our self-care. It's like we know we need to, but it adds to our overwhelm. So this workshop is called The Gentle Rebellion Against Self-Care. And by that I mean against the idea that self-care is something more to do. That the idea that self-care is just another pressure, a list of things to do, something you ought to be doing more of and better. That's not helpful. That's really unhelpful. It's very easy to say, and this isn't a judgment of anybody who says this to you, because it's good when people say, how are you looking after yourself? But if it makes you feel worse, if it's like, yes, I really ought to be doing that, but until I get this done, I can't, then it's unhelpful. Although it's also helpful. It's helpful because if you notice that it feels like a pressure, it brings you here. and it hopefully brings you to take a moment of your time right now to pause this podcast and go straight to the registration link before you forget. It's easier to do it in the moment. So you can either just pause, go below this podcast, and you will find in the show notes, the top of the show notes, there will be a link. You just click on that, pop your name in the form, and you can either turn up live or you can get the replay. Turning up live would be lovely. I'd love to see you there. But the replay is equally as good. So I think the act of registering for a workshop and intending to be there and putting it in your calendar, that in itself, I would argue, is self-care, if this calls to you. So the link is www.heidimark.co.uk/self-care, or just click the link below here. So that's next Tuesday, the 18th of October at 7 p.m. BST, British Summer Time. We will be delving further into this topic, further as in I will be holding space for you to explore for yourself personally in a way that's just different than a podcast. It's a different energy, isn't it, when we come together over Zoom. Having said that, it is not, I don't run my workshops with participation because I want you to really focus on yourself. So there will be no, and also I find it too distracting if you've got this constant chat pop-up box. Drives me mad. It's not that I don't want to hear from people, it's that you can't type in the chat and listen. It's not possible. So although there may be good things to say, I always encourage people to just jot it down and then come back to it, because either I'm about to answer it or you can ask me at the end. So the way it will work is I will be teaching and holding space for you to allow my words to wash through you. So you can either journal. So if I was going to do it like showing up completely and I had for myself, as in I've got time and space to do this, I would probably get into bed because I love doing nourishing workshops from my bed. So I'd probably put my PJs on, or if I had the sitting room to myself, I would light the fire and I get a blanket and my dogs and a warm drink and my journal. And that's what I would do, because I really like to do that and I make it like an occasion of comfiness. But if I just didn't have time to do that, or the time was just wrong for me, or it just wasn't working, I would literally just have it on. And I would not attempt to do all the journaling. I would just do the journaling in my head. I would do mind journaling. I would just let the words wash over me, even if I was distracted. And that is just as good. It's not about making it a pressure. And this is part of it. So how you respond to the invitation to come and hang out with me at a workshop can show you things about how you feel about self-care, and how you approach it tells you that as well. So if you decide that you can only come if you can make it live, that you can only come if you can carve out time and nobody will disturb you, then that could be it could be an interesting thing to look at. What's your reaction? How are you going to show up? Are you going to show up? Are you even going to register? If you're not going to register, why not? It's free. It's going to be high quality. I run really good workshops, and I value your time hugely, and I value your registration and your commitment to be there. So you get to just show up, no video, no audio on. I will teach for about 40 minutes. Might go on for a little bit longer, and then I'll be about, if you want to either chat or switch on your video and meet me and talk to me, it's up to you. I don't mind. It's your time. It's a gift to you. So I'm really looking forward to this, because I'm looking forward to holding space for that. This is not a topic that I've taught on its own like this before, and I'm looking at it differently than I have done previously. So previously it would be incorporated in work I do with my clients. It's incorporated within Get Your Life Back, my group program, but it's not something I've taught as a standalone thing. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. I'm getting ideas coming from all over the place that keep feeding into it, and yeah, it's just going to be really good. So register now. Look forward to seeing you there, or look forward to sending you the replay, whatever works best for you. And please do let other people know, because there's lots of people who need this. And actually, one of the things that got me thinking about this was that I keep seeing the words self-care isn't optional. It's like, yeah, but doesn't mean it's easy. So I guess the word optional probably got me. Overwhelm is optional, self-care is not optional. Yeah, we know that, but it's adding to my overwhelm. So instead of telling me that I ought to be prioritizing it, show me how, make it easy, make it reduce my overwhelm, not add to my overwhelm. Yeah. And there's 2 more things that really inspired me to create this workshop. I was also inspired by just noticing the general pressure. So I've been in groups recently, or I've seen evidence of this, where somebody is told, or they know that they ought to be up leveling their self-care, but although they're trying to receive that as with the intention it was given, which is with love and care, I could see that it was adding to the pressure, to the overwhelm. And it just made me go, that's not right. That's not what the person saying it intended. And what can we do about that? Because it's really important. Because yes, self-care of course is important, but if it just adds to your to-do list or your invisible get better at list, then really it's unhelpful to even know that you ought to be up-leveling your self-care. It's just it's too much. I don't like that pressure. I'm very sensitive to anything that would have added to my overwhelm back when I was really struggling, or anything that will add to my overwhelm now, or anything, if I just see people who I know are feeling overwhelmed, and then it's just like another thing to do, even if it's a good thing. So that was one of the things, and then that was 2 of the things, and then the last one was the very fact of my own story. So I was prioritizing my self-care when I burnt out, and I did not know I was about to burn out. I thought, this is really judgy, I thought people who got overwhelmed were just somehow not as organized as me. They didn't know about meditation and mindfulness. They just didn't know how to look after themselves. They were just a bit, I don't know, almost, I guess, flaky, or almost taking on too much and just being ridiculous. Of course, they should have better boundaries and all these things. Now, I didn't think all of these things, and I'm saying this with love for myself and the shameful kind of reaction. But I guess it's a protective reaction at the time, because I saw myself, part of my identity was somebody who knew my stuff. So I was I had a well-being lead role. And I was also, before that, responsible for other people's well-being in terms of helping managing a large department. So it shocked me that I suddenly was struggling, and it did feel like it was sudden. Now, obviously, if I look back, which I obviously have done, I can see the signs, and the signs were the very things that I talk about on this show. And that's why I'm so passionate about overwhelm, because overwhelm is the gateway to the rest of the mess, the exhaustion and the burnout, the quitting, the part quitting of life, the giving up on your dreams, the thinking that you're not really, obviously for you can't have everything you want unless you pay this price. And it's a tough price to pay, because being unable to really be present in your life with those that you love, enjoying everything you've worked so hard for, that's a tough price to pay, and it is not temporary. And we think it's temporary. We get stuck into that pattern of, I'll just put up with this now in order to do this, so that this happens, and when that happens, then everything will magically be better. And I was stuck in that for years. And the problem is that things did get better temporarily. They did, definitely. Like, so you have the small breaks in the week, don't you? You manage to get home and collapse, and then you've got weekends, and then eventually weekends just become about propping yourself up to get through the week. And then holidays can be good, although it can take 5 days to unwind and 2 days to wind up again to come back again. But there are breaks, there are big things that happen. We get promoted, or we let go of some responsibility, or we change jobs, or a person who was very difficult to work with leaves and things feel better, or there's some minor reorganization at work which feels better, and there you move house and that's done. you get something done. But the thing is, it's not the outward stuff, although that's really important, and of course it makes a difference. Of course it makes a difference if you're in a toxic workplace. But what I know now is that's not what caused my burnout, and I thought it was. So I tried to make it a better place to work for me and for everybody else. I couldn't. I mean, there were things I did which I'm sure had benefit, and people I'm sure are grateful for, but overall I was fighting a very big system, and the deep roots of that system are not based in high human functioning. And I think that's true for most of our organizations, and I think that things are about to change, because I think we've had enough. I think things are changing. However, for me, when I blamed things on those external things, I got stuck in that trap. When this happens, then things will be better. And because things were better for a while, I believed that, and then it would happen again. So I didn't see it coming, because I genuinely thought I was coping really well, because I thought in order to cope, there were things I had to do, like get stuff done, manage expectations, compartmentalize work and home, prioritize self-care, prioritize everything other than work so it didn't get lost. There were all these things I was doing which are sensible things to do. They look like they make sense, and they do make sense, but not until you've dealt with the stuff underneath. And the stuff underneath is when I look back, I would never treat myself like that now. The way I treated myself was it's just completely unacceptable to me now. I just can't imagine ever thinking that would be okay. And that's fascinating to me, because that means that what's happened now is I now trust myself to notice when those boundaries are being crossed, or before they're crossed. I now notice what's acceptable to me. I know, and I know myself, and I trust myself, and I know what I need to feel well and to be happy. And I don't think I could have negotiated that within the education system, and I'm okay with that. Some people can, but it's not me. It's not for me, and I'm okay with that. Now, I chose to become self-employed, to find my way of living that works for me. But that doesn't mean that you have to. It doesn't mean that you have to break everything. Sometimes these are just underneath secret shifts, which is why I call it the gentle rebellion, because for me it's really important that we learn how to take care of ourselves without adding to our overwhelm, without causing more pressure. And if we cause masses of disruption, which is the way I did it, I burnt out. I moved jobs twice, I burnt out, I just, not great. Lots of disruption. And that added to my pressure and my overwhelm. Now, I've worked through it, and I'm really grateful for it all now, because it brings me to here on this podcast, teaching this stuff to you. And that feels right to me. That feels like my work in the world, and I'm really grateful for it. But some of my clients just change how they are within their workplace, and then they might choose to move jobs within the same area. So it doesn't really look like anything much has changed, but they've changed, as in they love themselves more. Their non-negotiables are like I'm talking about with me, like they just wouldn't put up with that anymore. And that's it. It's that gentle secret shift to be able to work through that gently at your own pace, in your own way, in your own time. That's really important, and it's part of the gentle rebellion. So we get to rebel and say, no, that's not for me, but without having to deal with anybody else. Because one of the things I know happened with me is I would question work practices, which I felt were really unhelpful, just crazy stuff. And everybody would just look at me like, yeah, but that's just the way things are. Like, you're insane. So, and that's not helpful, is it? Because actually, I was completely sane to question those things. particularly for myself, they weren't working for me. So, and I actually don't believe they were working for anyone, but when it becomes a big deal, it costs energy because you're having to fight, get feisty and say, this needs changing. And yeah, you might be right, but as I know to my cost, you don't want to go changing the world until you can look after yourself really well, because it's going to cost you. So, and also it's easier. Let's make things easier. It's easier to work with yourself and to learn to treat yourself with utter love and compassion, to gradually negotiate boundaries that work for you, to find out what for you your non-negotiables are, than it is to fight the system from a place of stress and overwhelm. It's just easier. So let's make it easy. And also the word gentle is very important to me, because the real strength in gentleness. And I know for me, when I treat myself with gentleness, which is not my default pattern, it just reverses all of the habits that got me to burnout. Just in that one word, gentle. And rebellion, because, well, rebellion's fun, isn't it? Let's do things our way. Anyway, let's go back to, so that's why I'm doing this self-care workshop, is because I believe that the issue is other than it is appearing to be. So it looks like, and for some people, upping their self-care, they can do that, they know what it means, they've got it sussed, they do it. But if that's not true for you, and it certainly isn't that simple for me, or it wasn't, then doing things in a different way, rebelling and saying, yeah, I know I need to up my self-care, but I don't really know how, and it just feels like another pressure. So I'm not going to put that pressure on myself. Let's find a different way of doing it. If that's you, well, let's do this. It's important. You matter. How you are in the world matters. I was talking to a client about this morning, and how we want the world to be better, and we kind of tend to take a lot on our shoulders for things being better, and absorbing other people's emotions. And then the world stage at the moment is just very dramatic, and we could spend quite a lot of our day in fear and anxiety and grief for the world and for those around us. But who does that serve? I mean, it doesn't serve you, and it's not selfish to say that. It's unhelpful if everybody reflects back fear and anxiety, because it just creates more. What we want is more love in the world. We want everyone to love themselves. We want everyone to know how to look after themselves. We want everyone to be able to treat themselves with respect. When we do that, the world mirrors us. So how you are matters. So let's do this. Let's up your self-care without adding to your overwhelm. So for the rest of this episode, I just want to kind of frame the way I'm looking at it a little bit deeper. And then at the workshop, register below if you haven't already. I want to take you through and make it personal for you, so that you come out of that workshop feeling refreshed and inspired, and like the pressure's lifted, and you can see a way for yourself to gently rebel against self-care being another thing to do and another thing to be better at. So the way I'm looking at it at the moment, and this is developing day by day as I really focus and hone in on this in order to hold this beautiful workshop. So at the moment, the way I've kind of got it in my head is that we can view self-care as maintenance, so you can keep going and you can do more. So this is the kind of thing, like you wait until you're partly broken and then you go and get it fixed. So this would be having a massage because there's kind of two ways. One is you've wrecked your back and you're really stressed and you really need a massage. So you get so bad that you can really justify it. Yeah. And the other is that you have regular massages because you're so stressed and you know this is a good idea. Now, this is where I was. So I swung from having a massage when I'd wrecked myself And then in the end, I was like, right, well, we just need to commit to this monthly. So at one time we had, well, several times actually, we'd have somebody lovely who'd come to the house and we'd both have a massage. And that was absolutely wonderful. But the massage was very, very focused on kind of repair, like get yourself together, you know, back it. So you just keep going. So it would be like, what's your problem areas? And then focusing on your problem area with always the same areas, right? Because it's where we hold our stress. And then it would be like trying to get the knots out of those areas, trying to solve a problem. So the body becomes this problem to be solved. And although the massage is nice, what I did notice was afterwards I would be wrecked. Like I would sleep so heavily that the next day I'd wake up almost kind of foggy because all of this stress had been released. But really, I probably needed to sleep for a week, but I couldn't because I had to get up and go to work. So I didn't really even recover from the massage. And so it never really worked as in, yeah, there's the language. Using a massage to work, to get it to work, to get it to, which means that it solves the problem. The problem was I was pushing myself too hard. I wasn't listening to my body. I was doing a job which was really difficult for me personally to, I don't know, just like take a break, get any time outside, give my mind a rest because it was incredibly cognitively demanding, eat in peace, even have time to go to the toilet. I mean, it was just such a demanding job. And I used to come home aching even if I hadn't even walked further than the toilet all day. So it was not good for me. It was really unhealthy. And I tried so many things to make it better for me. And some things would work for a while, like, you know, going in early to get super organized for the day so the day would run better, working through lunch so that I could leave on time so I'd get home before it's dark, for at least most of the year, you know, just like, and then adding in things like weekly yoga, adding in things like joining a choir because I love to sing, like adding in things, booking weekends away, you know, adding things. It was always adding things in. It was always squeezing, like you squeeze life and then work gets squeezed and then that puts more pressure on work. And it's just like hopeless. It's just really hard work. It becomes like another job just trying to maintain. And of course the idea was supposed to be work-life balance, and I just think, oh, for God's sake, work-life, what does that even mean? It doesn't work for me. That I don't even like the notion. I haven't worked out why, but I just naturally have this rebellion against the term work-life balance. What a nonsense. But that's another, let's not go down that route. Let's stick with rebellious self-care. So that idea that you should and ought to know how to maintain yourself better so that you are never overtired, you are always at your peak, you don't get grumpy with anyone, you always healthy, you don't get sick. It's almost like if you were better at self-care, then you would never need any care from anyone else. Like there's no excuses, you know, like a professional person knows how to take care of themselves. So what's wrong with you? Like you ought to be better at this. What's wrong with you? Why are you sick again? Why are you so tired? Why are you so grumpy? Why can you not remember what you're doing? It's this, and I'm not saying anybody says that to you, but it feels like that pressure, or it felt like that to me. It's like, you ought to know how to take better care of yourself because then you wouldn't be a problem. Your body wouldn't let you down. Your mind wouldn't be clogged. Everything would run smoothly. It's like it's another failure. You failed. What's wrong with you? And then you're like, well, maybe I need to work part-time, or maybe I need to let go of some of my additional responsibilities so I had less pressure. It's like, so what you're kind of saying there is, if you were tougher, if you were better, then you'd be able to handle this job and your life. What's wrong with you? Look around you. Everybody else is managing it. Are they? Because I'm pretty sure you are the woman that you compare yourself to. Like, if you'd known me when I was heading for burnout and didn't know it, even though I practiced all the awareness techniques. God, you got to laugh at this stuff, haven't you? You've got to laugh at me. Laugh at me. Laugh with me, kindly, at my madness. You would have assumed that I was doing brilliantly. I thought I was. Like, I was kicking ass until I broke. Right. So that's self-care, isn't it? Self-care is this thing that you're good at because you're a professional and you know how to look after yourself. You have good boundaries and you just look after yourself, and therefore you're always running smoothly. Like, you're never sick, you're never stressed, it all happens, all a load of rubbish. So that kind of self-care is maintenance so you don't let anyone down, and it's also a list of things to do. So it's an outward expression. It's like you have massages so that your body works properly. You eat well so your body works properly. You have good sleep hygiene so that you can cope with the next day. You exercise so that you're healthy and have energy and can focus, because this is what we're told. Exercise is good for you for lots of reasons. Yes, I knew this. Exercise is good for me. Meditation is good for me. Yoga is good for me. Mindfulness is good for me. Relaxation is good for me. Having hobbies and outside interests is good for me. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, man. Too much good for me. Too many pressures. Too much. We know all of this stuff in our heads, but it's not connecting to our hearts. It's just another form of overwhelm. So let's just turn this around. Let's do this the rebellious way. So because the gentle rebel commits to herself first, and yes, I know that that very statement can be triggering. Commits to herself first. Isn't that selfish? I was reading something the other day which said that, I was listening to something, it said that women have been taught to put themselves last. And you think, well, that sounds really sexist, but, you know, the sexes are treated differently. We are different as well. And I also think that maybe, I mean, there could be like some biological thing where, although I've got to tell you, remind me to tell you the story about my bantam. I do wonder sometimes, having had children myself, whether there's like some biological imperative of kind of martyrdom and sacrifice going on. But if I then tell you about my bantam, I can then question it. Although obviously human babies are born utterly hopeless and need stupid amounts of care for a very long time. Whereas, so one of my bantams, who's called Blue, as in the character in Jurassic Park 2 or 3, can't remember why she was called that. She was just like one of those, what are they called? The scary dinosaurs. But she's very sweet, but she's just like really sharp and looking around. Anyway, she's called Blue, and she's just hatched an egg. And this tiny little chick was born like tweeting away, running away, like just like not completely independent, because she needs the heat of her mum, and she's also being taught brilliantly by her mum. She's wandering around the garden copying everything her mum is. So cute. It's a tiny little chick copying everything her mum does. But, you know, pretty independent, right? Because we know this, because unfortunately and sadly, most chickens are raised under heat lamps, not with their mums, which I think is obviously very sad. Anyway, super independent, but still really, honestly, they're so sweet. It's just like, she really needs her mum. She loves her mum. Anyway, I think she was 3 days old, and I decided, well, they need to go out. They can't. Chickens don't like being inside. It's not good for them. It's not good for humans really either, is it? It's not only good for anyone. Everyone likes being outside. Maybe you don't. If you don't, that's fine. I'll put an or not on that. I never like to tell anyone what to do. Anyway, chickens like being outside. So I put them in the garden. And oh yes, you need to know this bit. This tiny little chick is called Florence Highlander. Just so you know. So Florence Highlander is wandering around outside for the first time with her mum, and she comes across a worm. And she's eating the worm, and Blue, her mum, comes along and steals the worm off her and eats it. Now you can look at that and go, well, she's a selfish mum. But the thing is, she's not, because if anybody goes near her baby, if anybody goes anywhere near Florence Highlander, she puffs herself up to twice the size and shrieks. Like, she will pin down another chicken. I don't know what she would do to that chicken. It's pretty scary. She will pin her down and she will tell her, you stay away from Florence Highlander. Like, she is a fierce mother. And she's just dedicated several weeks of her life to hatching this egg. So she's not selfish. On the other hand, having been sat on eggs and only got off once a day for weeks, she needs food. She needs to replenish herself. She's on special food, but, you know, that worm, Florence Highlander didn't need a whole worm. No, she's just a tiny little thing. She probably couldn't have eaten it anyway. So actually, it wasn't a selfish act. And for me, there's something really poignant about watching that. Blue knows how to both look after her mum, and bantams are some of the best mothers. Like, I don't know why, but apparently they're better than full-size hens. They're really, really good at hatching eggs and looking after their chicks. They're just very, very good mothers. They're very dedicated. They're so dedicated that they spend half the year being broody and not producing eggs for me. So I think I'm going to have to get some full-size hens just to have more eggs. But anyway, they are fantastic mothers, but they also need to look after themselves. And I just thought that stealing of the worm and eating it was just a really interesting example of doing both, of holding both, of being able to be there and care, but also look after yourself. There was a story somebody told me, or I read when my children were small, about how somebody watched this mother and two children climb up a hill, and when they got to the top of the hill, the mother got out a bar of chocolate and she split it into 3. That's the end of the story. It's not a very exciting story, but it's actually quite profound, because I have seen, and I think my mother would have done this, mothers get out chocolate and break it in 2 and give it to the children and not have any for herself. That to me was a very common thing, or my feeling about the women around me when I was a child. And feminism was a big thing. So I grew up in the 70s and feminism was a big thing. I don't think it had quite got to all women. There was still a big thing about you shouldn't go out to work, you should be at home if you're a wife and a mother. But, you know, it was there. And yet, I think, I don't know, even now, you know, I think women do find it difficult to put themselves first. It feels selfish. It feels wrong. So I think we need to just turn that around. And instead of seeing self-care as a list of things to do that involve negotiating time for yourself, feeling like you're selfish, feeling guilty, are just quite difficult things, like big things, emotionally difficult to negotiate, add to your overwhelm and pressure. If we just let that go and instead say, what if self-care was more profound than that, but also simpler? So if we rebel against that and we just say, self-care is the act of caring deeply for yourself, or not even the act, because it's not really, I want to get away from the actions, because actions add to your to-do list and you'll get better at list. I want to get away from the shoulds and the oughts and all of that kind of stuff, and just go with self-care being deep care for oneself, that we can turn it inwards and make it private and secret and much easier. So how do we do that? Well, I would just argue that neutral noticing does it, which brings us back to the 1 minute mark. The 1 minute mark is my free 1 minute audio, which is just tuning in and listening to yourself, noticing completely neutrally how you feel in this moment. It is life-changing because it does so many things without you having to do anything or even know what they are. So it reverses the habits of putting yourself last, of not noticing how you feel, of not listening to your body, or of treating your body like another thing that needs attention and maintenance, rather than the old friend it is. So if we just take this for a moment, tuning in and listening to yourself, to your body, to your heart, just a tuning in and listening, and noticing and acknowledging without having to do anything. And this is really important, because as soon as we feel we have to act on something that we discover, it adds to our pressure. It adds to our overwhelm, because it becomes another thing to do, or another thing to get better at, another should, another ought, another must. Instead, having the freedom to just notice. So just tuning in and noticing what's going on in the body, even if it feels difficult. And it feels difficult because when we tune into the body after we've ignored it for a long time, we often find things that feel difficult. For example, a stiff neck, a tight jaw, an upset digestive system, back problems, all sorts of things. And this can then feel like, oh, now I need to solve them. So if we remove the need to do, if we remove the need to listen to the mind and it's off to solve a problem, it's analysing, it's your own fault. You shouldn't have sat at your desk for so long. You shouldn't have pushed yourself so hard. You shouldn't have gone away for the weekend because now you're too tired to cope. Anything like that. So we can notice that as well. But primarily, to me, we can reframe, we can gently rebel against self-care being this big, huge thing that we ought to be good at, and just say, I'm just going to listen to myself. I'm just going to notice. I'm just going to acknowledge. Because if you think about it, we feel most loved when somebody notices how we're feeling. But it's quite difficult for other people to notice how we're feeling. And if we always have that expectation that others will always notice, we put the power onto them. Just like if I say that working in a toxic work environment caused my burnout, I give the power away. When I take it back and forgive the people who didn't always behave with the care they could have done, or the whole system and historically how it's developed, when I let go of that and say, yes, but when I care for myself deeply, when I look back and think, well, there were warning signs that I could have paid attention to, but I just didn't have the kind of knowledge I have now about how to listen to the body, how to heed those warning signs. And that's now what I teach. When we turn that around, we get to decide. We get to decide how we care for ourselves. We get to own the feeling of deep self-care. We get to care for ourselves easily, privately, quietly. And from there, we can then decide whether or not, over time, we want to change boundaries, up on non-negotiables. Maybe you decide, yeah, I do want a massage every month and I don't need to justify it. I'm the kind of person who has a massage, not because I overwork and I need it to mend myself so I can keep going, but just because I like massages, full stop. Or not. Massage might not be your thing. That might feel too big. That's like long, that could be miles down the road for you, or it could be not for you. It doesn't matter. The most important thing, and this is also important because life changes. So the most important thing is when we can just change self-care and make it a deep caring for ourselves, a quiet, gentle rebellion, just a tuning in and listening and noticing and acknowledging. And then the outside might look similar. We might have similar things in it that we wanted to do before or not. But the difference internally is profound, and it also lasts the distance, because when we learn to listen to our bodies, listen to our hearts, really hold space for ourselves with love and kindness, moment by moment, effortlessly. When we learn this, whatever happens in our life, we can negotiate and keep our self-care because we're listening. Because when we allow the body and the heart to weigh in on the conversation, not only do we take the pressure off the poor, overloaded mind, not only do we lift the fog of overwhelm, but we have just an easier way to get through our life. Not get through, I don't like that word. We have an easier way to be in our life. We have an easier way to negotiate, to navigate, because we have all of the information we need. We have the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the heart, and the mind can weigh in as well. We can look after the mind though, stop overloading it. So when we bring all of those together, life's just easier. Life's more joyful. Self-care just becomes, well, I care for myself. I love myself, so I'm not doing that. I love myself, so I choose that. I love myself. I recognise I need this. Or not. It's this constant, I need this or not. I choose to do this or not. It's a dance rather than a fixed list of things I ought to be really good at. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed my delving into the difference between self-care as something to add to your overwhelm versus deep care for yourself. I'm really looking forward to this workshop next Tuesday. I'm hoping to see you there or to see your name on the registrant list so that you can catch the replay, and yeah, looking forward to it. So that's register by clicking the link beneath here or go to heidimarke.co.uk/selfcare. Lots of love. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If this resonates with you, please use the like, subscribe and share buttons to help other people find their way here too. And please do go to www.heidimarke.co.uk/the 1 minute mark with an E to join my mailing list and receive my free 1 minute life-changing audio practice.